And on we go with our featured program today. So as the family has assembled, I'm going to give a brief introduction. We are going to be talking about Stan McDonald, the King of Cruise. Even if you know that he founded a cruise line that changed the way we travel in the world, even if you know him as a member of this club for 57 years and counting, and even if you know that his ships inspired the Love Boat, there's much to know about him as a family man, as a lover of his family, and with the deep values he brought to his work. His remarkable adventures introduced Seattle to the world and introduced his customers to the ports around the world. His daughter Lori gave him a gift of a memoir of his life, and she says that he turned that small gift into the biggest gift of all, the most wonderful gift she could imagine, a way for his family to know him more deeply and for all of us to be inspired by, to risk and reach in our own lives. Please welcome Stan McDonald's family, Lori McDonald Johnson, Lamont McDonald, his brother, Lars Johnson, his son-in-law, Jenny Johnson, granddaughter, Jonas Johnson, grandson, and the author of the book, Suki Hutton. And I'm going to turn the podium over to Lori to lead us through the adventures.
Thank you, Laura, and it's wonderful to be here with all of you Rotarians. My father is just so excited about this event. My father has lived such a full, fantastic life. I was listening to him one evening when I realized I wanted my kids to know more about it and be able to talk with their grandfather about his experiences. So that Christmas, I said to him, "Here's my gift to you. I'd like for you to write a memoir, and I'll find someone to help you do it. I want your grandchildren and great-grandchildren to be able to read the stories of your life, and I want to read them too. What do you think of the idea?" And he said, "I love it." And then he made the time to look back over 90 years. His childhood in Eastern Washington during the Depression, his service in World War II, the first business he built, his vision of founding a cruise line and creating a new style of travel. He described his adventures, mistakes, and the successes that made him proud. He talked about the lifelong joy that his family has brought him and the values he lives by. He took my Christmas present and turned it in the biggest, most wonderful gift I could ever imagine. A way for us to know him more deeply. I am thrilled that many, many generations to come can be inspired by him. And now I'd like to introduce the fabulous writer that worked with my dad to create the King of Cruise, Suki Hutton.
Thank you. Stan was born on a farm in Coaldale, Canada, and grew up in Yakima, Washington in the 1920s and 30s. As Stan himself says, that work ethic was just always there. He did the usual assortment of odd jobs, paper routes, mowing lawns, driving a widow around town without a license. Stan's curiosity and his sense of enterprise put him at the leading edge from the start. At 13, he walked out to the Yakima airport and suggested that he could clean airplanes in exchange for free rides over the local countryside. This was in 1933, when very few people had been on a plane. He didn't tell his parents about his new job until after he'd flown for the first time. In 1938, Stan started at the University of Washington. He was a student and an entrepreneur. He cleaned and rented boarding houses, sold cars for his uncle, and was chosen from 200 applicants for a job at People's Bank, which offered magnificent pay for part-time work, $60 a month. Stan was busy, but not too busy to notice a beautiful girl named Barbara Balkema. He proposed New Year's Eve when she was 19 and he was 22. They've been married 69 years and have 2 children, Lori and Kirby McDonald. Stan signed up for the Naval Air Corps in 1942. He graduated from the University of Washington in June 1943 with a degree in business administration and promptly got a telegram from the Navy telling him to report for duty. Stan had almost finished his training as a Navy flyer when a zealous ensign reported him for being married, which was against regulations. He finished his Navy career as an aerologist. By 1946, Stan had a job with Northrop Gaines in Seattle, selling wheels, casters, and hand trucks. Later that year, he bought the company's inventory, found a financial partner, and created Air Mac, which he turned into a hugely international materials handling company. Stan was one of a number of Seattle businessmen who enthusiastically promoted the 1962 World's Fair. In fact, he gave presentations on it at Rotaries in California and Okinawa. Air Mac provided caster wheels for the Space Needle's rotating restaurant and ground transportation for the fair, including electric carts and pedicabs that Stan ordered from Taiwan. And that's Kirby McDonald getting ready to drive Seattle Mayor Gordon Clinton. But Stan unexpectedly became involved with a completely different part of the fair. One pressing question for the fair organizers was housing. Where was the city going to put all of the visitors? I would like to introduce Stan's older brother, Lamont McDonald. Lamont is the former head of Frederick & Nelson and of Pentagram Corporation. And he was on the scene when Stan's World's Fair inspiration struck.
I'm not going to talk on all of this. Some of you know me, and I'll go on and on and on, but they've restricted me. But I do want to say I was on the World Trade Committee, or the World Fair Committee at this time, and Stan was active, and you've heard about that and what he did for the World Fair. And I thought, well, I'm not going to add anything to that. But we were in a we would have his family over for a barbecue, and we'd go over to their place for a barbecue, and Stan and I would get up to date on what was happening in the world, and it was good for both of us. But we were having this barbecue, and we got to talking about bringing a passenger ship here to serve as a floating hotel. And the reason for that, we were both worried what we were talking about for the World Fair was so exotic and so good, we thought we're going to get a lot of people here, which turned out that way. And so anyway, Stan came up with the idea of selling the trip itself. You know, we belong to two Scotch clans. I belong to Lamont, and that's Lamont, that's the Scotch clan. But we both belong to the Lamont, and we both belong to the McDonald clan. So we're a little tight, and we want to make a little money. And I think you know Stan especially on that. Anyway, he had some guys work out some figures and found that it could be profitable of selling the trip itself. So he worked with Joe Gandy, the president of the World's Fair Commission, to find a passenger ship to bring to Seattle, and many other people he worked with too. He got a small group of investors together. Then he flew to Jamaica with Peter Canlis, a friend of mine, a friend of Stan's, and had Canlis Restaurant at that time. And I had met with Peter before he came to Seattle with his restaurant, had a high regard for him, and I told Stan, take him and use him for all he's worth. And he did. And he looked at a ship called the Yarmouth and decided it looked pretty good, and they leased it. We didn't know it then, but it was a start of something big. And it's gone on, well, you'll hear more about it, so I'll shut up and let you hear more about it in detail.
The Yarmouth was going to sail from San Francisco to Victoria, BC, then to Seattle and the fair. Stan rented office space in San Francisco and placed an ad for 10-day cruises. And, as he says, it just swamped our office. People were lined up to get tickets. When the fair was over, Stan scheduled a cruise to take the ship back to Miami and sailed to Mexican ports on the way to the Panama Canal. Stan, who already realized that cruises need to offer memorable entertainment, even took a turn on stage. As Stan says, the fair opened my eyes to cruising's potential. It was where my spark came from. It gave me a whole new perspective on the world, and I just knew it would sell. By the fall of 1965, Stan had leased the Princess Patricia from Canadian Pacific, spruced up the decor, built a tiny pool on deck, and sold out a Christmas cruise to Acapulco. Stan named the route the Mexican Riviera. On that first cruise, the engines quit, the new air conditioners leaked, a pier was destroyed in a hurricane and had to be replaced with a barge that tipped people into the water. The laundry for more than 300 passengers was sent out and returned to the ship in a single, gigantic, unmarked batch of clothing. But the passengers told Stan that it was the adventure of a lifetime. It turned out that way for me too, he said. By 1968, Princess had leased a sleek new Italian ship, the Italia. On its first voyage for Princess, it featured the world premiere of the movie Valley of the Dolls with Patty Duke and Sharon Tate. By 1969, Stan had leased the Carla as well. It was also Italian, a deluxe new 960-passenger ship. He hired Geraldine Saunders as the cruise director. Every night, Geraldine wrote her mother a letter on the back of the day's activity schedule and asked her to save them, which would turn out to be a good move. That summer, Princess also pioneered luxury cruising to Alaska. In those days, it was the undiscovered country. Alaska had only been a state for 10 years. Today, it's still one of the most popular cruise destinations in the world. All in all, 1969 was quite a year for Stan. He sold Princess Cruises to Boise Cascade, sold Air Mac to RCA, and joined the board of Santa Fe Drilling, an international oil drilling company whose members included former President Gerald Ford and former United States National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft. Then, in 1970, Stan got a call from Boise Cascade. They wanted to sell Princess Cruises. Stan bought it back and quickly set the industry standard, attracting many appreciative repeat customers, like Cary Grant. In 1974, Stan sold Princess to the venerable shipping giant, the British shipping giant P&O, and agreed to remain as president for 5 years as long as he could take care of his other business interests. And, in typical Stan McDonald fashion, those interests made a splash. In 1977, Stan and his partner, Bob Halliday, bought the Chrysler Real Estate portfolio, one of the biggest real estate transactions in the United States at that time. It was featured in Forbes magazine. 1977 was also the year that Stan agreed with Aaron Spelling and 20th Century Fox to accommodate the filming of a new TV series on board Princess Cruises. Geraldine Saunders, the cruise director on the Carla, had turned those shipboard letters she wrote to her mother into a book called Love Boats. First, it was filmed as a TV movie on board the Sun Princess, and then in September 1977, it became a TV series. As Stan says, the Love Boat was the best thing that ever happened to cruising. It did an unbelievable amount for our industry. It set the world on fire. The Love Boat became a worldwide phenomenon, running for 9 years and translated into 29 languages. Of course, it's hard to top that, but in 1982, Stan's business ventures literally went to new heights. He and a group of Seattle partners bought a television station in Chicago, As part of the deal, they agreed to put twin television towers on top of the Willis Tower, formerly the Sears Tower, and until this year, the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. The TV towers added 255 feet to the building. So, next time you're in Chicago, you can look up and think of Stan. Stan still had a passion for cruising, and after he left P&O Princess, he and Lori looked for a ship to start a new cruise line, Sundance Cruises, on the West Coast. They found one in Sweden in 1983, the Svea Corona. That's when Stan and Lori met Lars Johnson, Stan's future son-in-law. At the time, Lars was head of Nico International, the world's largest flying squad ship repair company. Here he is to tell the story.
Thank you. I met Lori across the negotiating table in Stockholm in November 1983. I was competing for the contract to convert Svea Corona, the ship they had bought, from being an overnight Baltic cruise ferry to become a U.S. market cruise ship, the Sundancer. Needless to say, I did win the contract. Lori came and stayed in Sweden for the next several months as the owner's representative to oversee the conversion of the ship. We had several hundred workers doing the retrofitting and conversion of the ship, and I don't think they ever in their life had ever seen a woman owner's representative telling them what to do. Stan had totally delegated the overseeing of the ship conversion to Lori. He himself was busy here in Seattle or in the US setting up the offices here and getting the first season's cruises sold. We were doing this job at a very, very tight schedule because the selling of these cruises were very successful. And I was repeatedly told by Lori and the people from the cruise line that Mr. McDonald, do not accept this conversion to be delayed. Deliver at least a week early. And of course we did. I met Stan for the first time when the ship was delivered on time in Miami in the early summer of 1984. What struck me immediately when seeing Stan was his statesman-like appearance. He was such a natural, or is such a natural leader. During my first years in Seattle, I had a chance to work with Stan on a number of international cruise ship ventures. Both Stan and his brother, big brother, older brother, Lamont, became important and invaluable advisors when I started Stellar Holdings, today an international real estate investment and development company. And Stan came in as a partner. For me, it was fantastic to come to a new country and a new city and to be associated with guys like these two gentlemen. Honest, well-connected, and always very, very supportive. As a father-in-law, Stan has been just terrific, and it is wonderful to see how he has inspired his grandchildren to go out and make a difference. Among Stan's many gifts, he has a talent for staying calm in challenging situations, which, as you will see, came handy after the Sundancer was launched. Thank you.
On its third sailing, the Sundancer hit a rock around midnight and barely made it to shore. No one was seriously injured, but the ship was declared a total loss. Stan and Lori flew to the Baltic, bought another ship, and within a year had Sundance Cruises up and running again. A year after that, Stan and Lori merged Sundance Cruises with two other lines to form Admiral Cruises. They sold their stock in 1987, and Stan kept looking for another ship, which proved challenging. But by 1990, an intriguing new venture entered the picture. Stan invested in SkyPix, a far-sighted business that involved streaming customized, on-demand television to people's homes. Stan's grandson, Jonas Johnson, was only 3 years old when this all began. Here he is to describe how he's been inspired by his grandfather's vision and perseverance in an industry that was completely new to him.
So many people undercut themselves before they get started, but not my grandfather. He always shoots for the sky. He saw potential for on-demand television before email had been invented. He beat Microsoft to the punch and everyone. And despite being so incredibly early, our family stuck with it for 20 years to see it be a success. Under the leadership of my uncle, Kirby McDonald, he turned the company into Avail TVN. And in 1997, it was the largest digital media services company in the entire North America. Stan, when we asked him about this experience, he said this was the most unknown business experience of his life. And I think the biggest learning lesson I took from it is commitment. If you stay committed to a venture, no matter how crazy it is, you can make it happen.
Stan has always been strongly community-oriented. He has given generously of his time, expertise, and money for many decades. In the late 1990s, Seattle's retail core was weakening to an alarming degree. Stan joined a group of like-minded civic investors to support a plan for downtown revitalization, including Nordstrom's move to the old Frederick and Nelson building and the creation of Pacific Place. He also continued to serve on a number of boards. More recently, at Lori's request, Stan began looking over his life, not only the facts and the memories of his career, but the values that he's held dear along the way. He described his deep faith in God and emphasized his belief in education. And when he was asked what has brought him the greatest joy in life, he didn't hesitate. My family, he said. I don't even have to think about it. And speaking of family, you might be wondering how Stan's book got its title. His granddaughter, Jenny Johnson, can explain.
When I was in 8th grade, there was an art project being posted around school. They wanted you to draw a photo of your role model and write a few paragraphs about how they inspired you. A lot of my friends were drawing photos of rock stars, famous historians, or even past presidents. But right away, I knew I wanted to draw a photo of my grandfather, who had always been my role model. I called the picture the King of Cruise and wrote a few paragraphs about how he started his career so young and ultimately changed an entire industry. I always try to model myself after him, his honest character, his sense of humor, and of course, his entrepreneurial spirit. It's often hard for families when a certain member is running such a large company, especially when they have to travel so often. But that never happened with Stan. He always made sure to get his family involved. And since his work was always his passion, he made sure he had fun doing it. But then again, work doesn't seem so bad when it might involve a cruise through the Caribbean.
Today, because we are honoring an extraordinary entrepreneur, it makes sense to leave you with the advice that Stan has given to his grandchildren about business. Of course, I would get in the right business. You have to like what you do or forget it. That's at the top of the list. I always enjoyed the businesses I was in. It's a very rewarding and interesting thing to see a business grow that you've started right from scratch. Know your objectives. You want to take a certain amount of measured risk in what you're doing as you proceed in business. Be honest with people. That's very, very important. Take good people with you. Find good people and let them do their jobs. One of the biggest things I did was getting the right people and then working through them, giving them their own reins, and really compensating them well. I had people working for me that made more money in commissions than I took out of the company as a salary. I've always felt that you ought to run a business on the basis of mutual fairness and respect. There's no use in doing a deal if somebody can't do well for you and do well for themselves. Sometimes somebody would say, well, we can get you a better price. But what are you getting with it? What kind of service are you getting? How prompt are they at getting things done and correcting problems? We wanted companies that wanted to get our business and keep our business. And that's what we seem to come up with. With Princess, we wanted to give people the very best there was. That didn't mean cutting a dime off some supplier. We worked in cooperation. I've had many people come up to me and talk to me and praise how well things were run. It all meant quite a bit to me. Work hard. I worked hard all over the world. I was willing to work harder than anyone in the company. I just thrived on seeing my businesses grow and prosper. Not because of dollars, but because of pride. So many of the people who worked for me became successful in their own right. My businesses became a tremendous part of the community. I wasn't interested in pushing people out of the way to succeed. I was interested in leadership, in bringing people along to succeed with us. That was the main thing. You have to be patient and be realistic. If you've got a bad business, get out. Sometimes things develop that make it impossible. If you've got a good opportunity, analyze it and study it and do what you can to make it successful. Most of them could have a great future. And now Lori has a message from Stan.
My father celebrated his 93rd birthday just 10 days ago, and he is so thrilled that you're honoring him today. Unfortunately, his health wasn't good enough to come today, but he wanted to make a thank you personally to everyone. So here is his thank you.
Thank you, Rotary, for...
Well, that didn't quite work, but he said, thank you, Rotary, for honoring me, and he really felt it. It was wonderful. And this is his book, The King of Crews, and I'm so happy to say that there's been so much enthusiasm around this book that Princess Cruises has heard about it, and they're going to be selling the book on their ships in the gift shop where the Love Boat originally started. So that's very exciting. But today we actually have a better opportunity, and that is we've brought the King of Crews for the very first time here, and we're going to give 100% of the proceeds to the Rotary-funded program at UW Foster Business School mentoring program. So the book will be in the back. It's on sale for $29.95. We'd love to have you take a look. There's lots and lots more pictures, and really, I think it's just a fabulous book. So I hope you'll take a look at it. And if you want to buy extra copies, we do have it on the website, King of Crews. But today, all the proceeds will be going to the UW. And I don't know if we have time for questions today, Laura? No? Okay, well, we'd like to thank you so much on behalf of the entire family, and especially my father. Thank you so much for having us here today.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.